Ernie Macmillan's impromptu song finally trailed off, leaving only the soft rustle of a devil's snare trying to curl deeper into the third greenhouse and the ordinary hush of soil and leaves. Ernie's cheeks were flushed as if someone else had just sung his heart out to a dangerous magical plant. "Merlin," he groaned, not daring to meet the snare's still trembling tendrils. That candy. The effect is significant and unique." Jiang Wu snapped her notebook shut with the same tone one uses to remark on the weather. "Duration's about 15 minutes. Thank you for your data, Mr. Macmillan." Ernie opened his mouth to protest being used as a test subject, but only ended up running a hand through his hair. "Next time there's a taste test like this, could you give a heads up?" "If the Weasley gentlemen provide a warning, I will pass it on," Jiang Wu replied, already taking another identical golden toffee from the box and studying it thoughtfully. Compulsory plant affinity. The method is strange, but the principle might be worth learning from. Her mind was already working through ways to extract that empathy effect and turn it into practical tools for magical gardening instead of a prank candy. Ernie, noticing her absorption, decided a little distance was prudent. I'd better get to the library for some NET, ancient runes references," he muttered and almost fled. Jiang Wu barely watched him go. She was focused on the pot of pyramid sand mixed with fertile soil. Under the lingering influence of that odd singing, the pot was behaving differently. The tiny golden flecks that had been drifting lazily through the soil were suddenly active. They clustered, drawn as if to a magnet, directly above the buried seed and formed a small, warm, golden vortex. The soil surface pushed up into a little mound. Holding her breath, she brushed the top layer of soil away with a jade trowel. The sun goldfinch seed she had been coaxing with fertile soil now had a hairline crack at its tip. A faint pale gold shoot trembled as it pushed upward. The sand around it felt unexpectedly warm, like a miniature sun channeling energy into the sprout. It worked. Even Jiang Wu, usually reserved, felt a surge of joy. The pure solar energy in the pyramid sand had accelerated the germination of this heliophilic plant and created a remarkable resonance with the life force in the fertile soil. The initial results of this cross-continental, cross-magical soil hybridization far exceeded expectations. She dove into detailed observation, measuring temperatures, noting the sprout's color and shape, and recording the shifting patterns of magical fluctuations in the soil. Time slipped by unnoticed. Evening brought a familiar flapping at the greenhouse transom. An owl dropped a heavy, bulging dragonhide pouch that clinked pleasantly on the workbench, Cedric's promised dragon dung fertilizer. Not long after, a larger great horned owl glided down bearing a thick letter on fine parchment, sealed with a wax stamp that wasn't Hogwarts or Diggory, but a shifting pattern of smiley faces and grimaces, the unmistakable mark of Weasley's wizard wheezes. She checked the fertilizer's quality first, then opened the letter. The handwriting was a touch more formal than a scribble, but the tone was still Fred and George, brash, enthusiastic, and businesslike. To the esteemed Miss Jiang Wu, on behalf of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, we are following up on the preliminary sample, Sunshine Serenade Toffee, delivered today, and would like to propose a cooperation. Through certain discrete channels, we've heard this sample produced astonishing artistic appeal and plant growth potential in the Hufflepuff greenhouse. We firmly believe that combining your extraordinary herbology expertise with our innovative product development will open a new era of magical entertainment and practical horticulture. We hereby submit our order requirements. 1. Sunshine Serenade Special Edition. We want to consistently reproduce the compulsory singing effect, but be able to control the song library. We've attached a list of popular songs for reference, and the duration, ideally 5 to 10 minutes. Too long might harm sales. Verb 2. Dandelion Detonation, Shampoo Concentrate. Needs to create an exploding, wind-dispersing effect, but hair must naturally regenerate within 24 hours. Safety is essential. We don't need complaints from bald customers. 3. New portable fast-acting fertilizer, a small, carryable item that with a sprinkle will instantly perk up or even bloom household ornamental plants. Maybe 1-second rejuvenation powder? Enclosed is an initial research deposit of 100 galleons. Please confirm receipt, along with concept notes and a recommended song list, from the Weird Sisters to Cauldron Bubbles. and several pages of sketches and technical requirements. We look forward to your reply and cooperation. Your loyal partners, George Weasley, Fred Weasley. Jiangwu weighed the money bag, galleons clicked satisfyingly, and glanced from the sprouted sun goldfinch to the golden toffee in the lengthy, exuberant order list. Research required funds, and the Weasleys were generous and wildly imaginative. Their ideas often sounded ridiculous, but there was a kind of magical logic in them that bent conventions. She fetched a piece of parchment and a quill and wrote a precise, technical response. Gentleman Weasley, order and deposit received. 1. Sunshine Serenade. The triggered magic is not tied to particular songs, but we can attempt to limit the magic's frequency band to favor certain musical types. I will need samples of the magic wave bands you wish to emulate rather than a song list. 2. Dandelion Detonation Concentrate. Requires further safety and regeneration testing. Timeline to be determined. 3. 1-second Rejuvenation Powder. Highly feasible. Initial purification experiments can reuse discarded inferior mandrake leaves and residue of the cheerful agent from the greenhouse. First batch of experimental samples can be released before next weekend. Note: additional materials or extended research time beyond the initial deposit will incur extra costs. Jiangwu handed the letter to the waiting great horned owl. When it flew off, the greenhouse sank back into quiet. Jiangwu looked once more at the precious sprout and the bag of dragon dung. On one side were strange plants raised from soil collected at ancient magical ruins, full of unknowns and risk. On the other, the boisterous but profitable orders of the Weasley twins, all threaded through her looming NET obligations. Peaceful school life it was not, but balancing knowledge, practice, and galleons felt intensely satisfying. She scooped some dragon dung fertilizer and began carefully feeding her other rare experimental specimens, already turning over in her mind how best to make use of the cheerful agent residue from the greenhouse. Chapter 122, Buds Under the Moon. Hogwarts was quiet at night. Most students were gathered around common room fireplaces or already tucked under warm blankets. But Jiangwu was still in Greenhouse 3, watching over her sun goldfinch sapling. It had only just pushed out a tiny tip. During the day, it needed the pyramid sand Cedric had brought to keep it warm. At night, it had to bask in the moonlight to grow strong. Cold, clear moonlight poured through the glass ceiling and fell across the tender golden sprout. The tip seemed to breathe, a faint shimmer pulsing along it. Jiangwu sat cross-legged beside it, sketching and taking notes in her notebook, recording every little change. The greenhouse was otherwise silent, save for the occasional rustle of moon-active plants. Then a soft shuffle came from the door. She lifted her head, fingers drifting toward her wand. Who would be here so late? The door eased open a crack, and a tall figure slipped in sideways, moving with an ease that showed he knew the place well. When he stepped into the moonlight, she relaxed, surprised and pleased. "Cedric? Why are you back? Weren't you in Hogsmeade?" It was Cedric. The hem of his robes was damp with night dew and flecked with glinting purple moss, but he was smiling, his eyes bright in the moonlight. "Just finished a small job, right on the edge of the Forbidden Forest," he murmured. "I remembered I'd forgotten to give you something. I saw the greenhouse lights still on, so I guessed you'd be here." He glanced at the faintly glowing sprout with genuine curiosity. "Am I interrupting its moonlight?" "It's busy," Jiangwu said, then eyed the moss on his robes. "A job in the forest? Was it dangerous?" "Not really, just something that wasn't behaving and was making the nearby plants overexcited." He spoke casually, then produced from beneath his cloak a long, slim object wrapped in soft leather. He handed it to her carefully. "I thought you might like this. I meant to give it to you later, but I didn't think it could wait." The leather was warm with his body heat. Jiangwu undid the clasp and found not a glittering trinket, but a section of branch that looked very old. Its wood was an intense deep blue, cool and smooth to the touch. In the moonlight, tiny silver-white points of light seemed to ripple through it, as if a miniature galaxy flowed within the grain. Jiangwu was captivated. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In a corner of the pyramid, with a pile of unwanted antiques," Cedric said softly. "It was listed as unidentified waste, but it felt unusual, pure like starlight. I thought it might be useful to you, so I brought it." He said it simply, But Jiang Wu knew it hadn't been straightforward to retrieve something from a place like that. She touched the wood, feeling its chill and the strange power that hummed beneath the surface. It's very much like the cold starwood described in the old texts, said to stabilize intense energies. This is precious. Cedric's smile turned a little roguish. On paper, it's trash. I figured giving it to you, who can make it valuable, beats letting it rot in a ministry storeroom. Consider it an investment in our future great researcher. Jiang Wu held the branch close, grateful. The gift mattered not only because of its rarity, but because he'd noticed her needs and remembered them. "Thank you," she said, and the word felt too small. He looked over at the sapling. Perfect timing, so adorable. He moved toward a bed of growling cabbages and, without another thought, scooped up a handful of dragon dung fertilizer. "These biting cabbages look ravenous. Want me to feed them a bit?" Jiang Wu couldn't suppress a smile. Here was the same excellent cursebreaker who'd returned from a risky mission with a lost treasure and now casually offered to fertilize temperamental plants. The sight was odd and comforting at once. "Just the ones on the left," she said. "They've been picky lately." They set to work beneath the moon. One recorded every subtle change in the little sprout, while the other fed the clamoring plants, their voices low as they traded stories about the pyramid and debated which fertilizer worked best. Time slipped by until the distant castle bell chimed. Curfew had long passed. Cedric dusted his hands. "I really should go. If Filch catches me again, I can't exactly say I was fertilizing the greenhouse at midnight, can I?" Jiang Wu walked him to the door. "Ced," she called suddenly. He turned. She held up the cold starwood in both hands and spoke seriously. "Next time, don't put yourself at risk to bring me things." He paused at the threshold, half in shadow, half in moonlight. His smile was warm and uncomplicated. "That depends on who it's for." With a wave, he slipped back into the night as quietly as he'd come. Jiang Wu closed the door and leaned against it, looking at the moon-soaked sprout in one hand and the star-flowing branch in the other. Her chest felt full. Her research path seemed always to meet unexpected helpers and small, perfect surprises. Chapter 123, Breakfast Invitation. After Cedric left, the greenhouse settled back into its usual quiet. Jiang Wu stayed with the small sprout and the piece of magical cold star wood, both bathing in moonlight, feeling inexplicably warm inside. She lingered until well past midnight, then slipped back into the Hufflepuff common room with the faint scent of earth and plants clinging to her. The fat lady's portrait looked half asleep and only grumbled, "So late," before swinging aside to let her in. The common room was empty, the embers in the fireplace glowing warmly. She fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. In her dreams, there were no complicated experimental readouts, only cool starlight and warm smiles. The next morning, Hannah Abbott woke her. "Jiang, wake up! You actually overslept? The sun must have come up from the west." Hannah's voice was full of surprise and a little gossip. "And someone's looking for you downstairs." Jiang sat up, rubbing her eyes. Sunlight already streamed through the circular dormitory window. It was clearly not early. She had stayed out too late and forgotten to set her alarm. "Someone's looking for me? Who?" she asked, yawning as she fumbled for her robes. Hannah broke into a teasing smile. "Who else? Our excellent graduated senior Diggory, of course. He's waiting by the common room door and said, 'No rush. Let Jiang have a good breakfast.'" She mimicked Cedric's polite tone. Jiang froze. Wasn't he supposed to report to the ministry first thing this morning? She hurried to wash and tidy her hair, though it still looked a little tousled, and, puzzled and oddly excited, walked out of the dormitory. Cedric was indeed standing at the entrance to the common room. He wasn't wearing the dew-streaked robes from yesterday, but a neat, dark travel cloak. His smile looked refreshed, and he held a bulging oil paper-wrapped parcel. "Morning, Jiang." His eyes curved when he saw her. "I hope I didn't disturb you. I was on my way back to the ministry and remembered you might have been up late and missed breakfast." He handed her the package, and an enticing aroma immediately drifted out. Honeyduke's new ham and cheese croissant. "I remember you said you liked savory things." Her stomach gave an involuntary small growl. She really had been starving. "Thank you." She managed, still a little slow to react. "You on your way?" Hogwarts to the Ministry isn't exactly on your way back here, is it? The Hufflepuff common room was in the castle basement, after all. Cedric smiled sheepishly, as if a small secret had been discovered. All right, you caught me. There's a slight backlog at the Owl Post. The report I sent back to the Ministry won't be dispatched until noon, so I had a bit of extra time. He paused, then asked casually, "It's a nice morning. Want to walk to the Great Hall together? I haven't eaten either." A few younger Hufflepuff students passed by, and seeing Cedric burst into excited whispers. "Senior Diggory!" Then looked curiously and grinned at Zhang. Her ears warmed. She bit into the croissant. The crust was crisp, the ham and melted cheese comforting on her empty stomach. Mmm. Her voice came out muffled with a mouthful. "Actually, I wanted to ask you some questions about the Cold Star Wood." They walked side by side down the corridor to the Great Hall. On a Saturday morning, the castle was leisurely. Students drifted about, and sunlight poured through tall windows in bright patches on the floor. "I thought you'd have left early," Zhang said, still chewing. "That was the plan," Cedric said, slowing his pace to match hers. "But when I woke up, I felt I should check, make sure our researcher hadn't fainted from hunger in the greenhouse." He grinned, then grew a little more serious. "Besides, it doesn't matter if the report goes out a bit later." Zhang caught the implication and felt her heart skip. She lowered her eyes and took another bite of the croissant to hide the small smile. "That Cold Star Wood," she said, steering the conversation back to safer ground. "Its internal magical flow is very peculiar. I sensed it last night. It seems related to the waxing and waning of the moon." Cedric's interest sharpened. "Very possibly. The subchamber where it was found has a fine crack at the top. Only when full moonlight hits at just the right angle does it perfectly illuminate the stone platform the obsidian casket sat on. The local guide called it something like the Path of the Moon God's Favor. I used to think that was legend. Now, it might be true." They talked of ancient magic, pyramid construction, and possible uses for the Cold Star Wood, and before they knew it, they were at the Great Hall entrance. Noise and food scents washed over them. Students crowded the 4 house tables, enjoying weekend breakfast. Cedric's arrival caused a small stir, especially at the Hufflepuff table where many greeted him warmly. He smiled and followed Zhang to the Hufflepuff long table, sitting beside her. "It feels like old times," he said, plucking a roasted tomato with a smile. Ernie Macmillan sat opposite and, on seeing Cedric, turned beet red, remembering his own splendid performance in the greenhouse the day before. He nearly buried his face in his porridge. Hannah and Susan exchanged a satisfied look and giggled. Zhang relaxed. The food, the easy chatter, and the person beside her put her at ease. She even told Cedric about the Weasley twins' outrageous order and Ernie's singing from yesterday. Cedric laughed, especially at the name 1-second rejuvenation powder. "That's very George and Fred," he said, "but if anyone could help them come up with something truly unique, it might be you." As they finished eating, Cedric suddenly remembered something. "Oh, by the way, isn't today a Hogsmeade weekend? Are you going?" Jiang nodded. "Yes, I need to send some things at the post office and pick up materials at the apothecary. Both my experimental supplies and the Weasleys' research samples need to be mailed." "Together?" Cedric asked naturally. "I don't need to be back at the Ministry until the afternoon. I can get a butterbeer at the 3 Broomsticks and reminisce about school days. And," he winked, "I can help you carry things. Dragon dung fertilizer is heavy." Zhang looked at his kind, smiling gray eyes, thought of the croissant he'd quietly brought last night, and the way he'd turned up this morning, and realized she didn't dislike this attention. "Okay," she said, a small smile appearing without her realizing it. "But I'm treating you to butterbeer." "Deal." Cedric's smile brightened. Sunlight streamed through the Great Hall windows, warming the long tables and falling across the 2 of them as they smiled at one another. The surrounding bustle blurred into background noise. It felt as if the new day would be very interesting indeed. Hogsmeade was especially lively that weekend. Students in robes of every house crowded the cobblestone streets, spilling into the shops. Warm sunlight fell on the village, and the air was thick with the sweet smell of candy and the malty tang of butterbeer. Jiangwu walked beside Cedric, and for the first time there was a small, deliberate change. Cedric's hand was holding hers. His palm was warm and dry as it closed around hers, steady and sure. Zhang started at the contact, her ears flushing pink, but she didn't pull away. She curled her fingers just enough and squeezed his hand back. A few sharp-eyed students nearby noticed at once. A cluster of younger Hufflepuffs leaned in, giggling and whispering, "Diggory and Chang," their faces alight with the triumphant, "I knew it" look. Cedric didn't seem embarrassed. He smiled and nodded at the friendly stares as if acknowledging a private truth. They stopped at the post office first. Zhang handed over the first batch of experimental samples for the Weasley twins, several small bottles of dubious-looking liquids, a pouch of sparkling powder, and a letter full of careful precautions. Cedric helped her fill out the forms and pay the postage with practiced, efficient movements. "I hope Fred and George's shop roof survives whatever's in there," he joked, glancing at the neatly wrapped parcel. "I included very detailed instructions," Zhang replied seriously. "If they follow them, at worst their hair will change color or they'll do a bit of tap dancing for a few minutes." From the post office, they drifted into Honeyduke's. The sweet shop was packed. Students wove between shelves under a cloud of sugary aromas. Cedric watched her with an amused smile. He knew she wasn't here just to buy sweets. "Stocking up on research materials?" he asked, eyes sweeping the bright displays. "Yes," Jiang said, already scanning a new display that promised unusual effects. "I want to analyze their latest products, see if there are any magical triggers I can learn from." Cedric helped nudge a path through the crowd, shielding her from jostling shoulders. When a gaggle of first years reached for the last large bag of fizzing whiz-bees, he plucked it from their clutches with the precision of someone used to winning tussles and handed it to Zhang like a prize. "For you," he announced, as if presenting war spoils. She laughed when he handed it over. "Thanks. This will help me figure out the limits of anti-gravity enchantments in confectionery." She glanced at his empty hands. "Aren't you getting anything? Didn't you used to like chocolate frogs?" Cedric shrugged and leaned in close, his voice low and warm. "I find watching you investigate weird candies far more entertaining than eating them myself." His breath brushed her ear as he spoke, and Zhang felt her cheeks tingle. She turned away and pretended to examine a giant screaming lollipop, but her bright ears betrayed her. Cedric's smile deepened at her flustered composure. In the end, Zhang bought a large bag of assorted experimental samples, and Cedric insisted on paying. "An investment in a future great researcher," he said. Candy bag in hand, they headed to the Three Broomsticks. Even in daylight, the pub bustled. Madame Rosmerta wove between tables, carrying trays of frothy butterbeer. They found a small table in a corner, and Cedric sent Zhang to watch their things while he ordered 2 cold butterbeers. "When we won a match or did well on our OWLs, we'd always come here to celebrate," he said as he returned with the drinks, a touch of nostalgia in his voice. Zhang took the cup. The cold had made a ring of condensation on its side. She drank deeply. The foam and the cool, sweet taste made her close her eyes. "And now?" she asked, looking up. "Now that a tricky curse has been lifted, will you still come for a drink?" "Now," Cedric said, watching her, the pub's warm light reflected in his gray eyes. "Now I think the best way to celebrate finishing a job is to rush back and share a butterbeer with someone special." His gaze was gentle and unmistakable. Zhang felt her heart skip. She took another long sip, using the cold to hide the heat in her face. "Then, next time you celebrate, remember to call me," she said softly. Cedric's smile spread like sunshine. "It's a promise." He hooked his pinky out in a childish gesture. She smiled and linked her pinky with his. His fingers were warm and steady. They sat in the noisy corner, sharing butterbeer and conversation. Cedric downplayed his adventures, an ill-tempered curse in the pyramids that had tried to braid his hair, nothing more than a funny story, while John complained about absurd orders from the Weasleys and Ernie's endless singing. Friends drifted by to say hello, and when they saw Zhang at Cedric's side, they returned knowing smiles. Sunlight slanted through the window, making the glasses on their table glint. The smells of malt, candy sweetness, and smoldering firewood mingled into that lazy, cozy Hogsmeade afternoon atmosphere. Zhang watched Cedric talking animatedly and felt a gentle filling of something in the part of her heart she'd always set aside for research. This warmth, easy companionship, The small intimacies of a shared butterbeer seemed to settle into her just as satisfyingly as any solved experiment. For the first time, she thought, being in love might be even more wonderful than studying the most complicated, magical plants. Chapter 125, Good Night in the Common Room. When they left the Three Broomsticks, the evening breeze had a chill to it, carrying away the pub's rowdy energy and the malty scent of beer. Cedric and Jongwoo walked back down Hogsmeade's main street at a leisurely pace, still holding unfinished sweets and a couple of new notebooks they'd picked up at Scrivenshaft's quill shop. Their hands stayed naturally intertwined. Compared with when they first arrived, Jongwoo seemed a little more used to the warmth of his grip. "Where to next?" Cedric asked, glancing at her. The setting sun rhymed his profile with gold. "Straight back to the castle, or shall we look around a bit more? I heard Zonko's just got a new batch of extendable ears that bite noses. Could be good for your research," he added with a mischievous glint. Jongwoo imagined herself wearing such a thing while taking notes and promptly shook her head. "No thanks. My lab doesn't need that kind of liveliness." She paused. "I do need to pop into that little spice shop next to Madame Putafoot's to buy some muggle herb seeds. The Weasley brothers' 1-second rejuvenation powder might need a natural fragrance to mask the dragon dung fertilizer." Cedric laughed. "We can't very well sell toffee that smells like fertilizer. Lead the way. Your spice procurement officer is at your service." The spice shop was narrow and crowded, shelves crammed with jars and bottles from all over the world, the air a heady mix of unfamiliar aromas. Jongwoo went straight for the basil, thyme, and rosemary seeds she needed. Cedric, meanwhile, wandered down the shelves, curiously picking up labels like African Love Potion Enhancer and Norwegian Black Dragon Sneeze Powder, used with caution, sniffing and then wrinkling his nose. At the counter, the proprietress beamed at them, especially at Cedric. "Oh, Mr. Diggory, long time no see. Bringing your girlfriend shopping? Are you cooking together? How sweet." Cedric smiled and took the paper bag of seeds. "Yes, ma'am. She's developing new recipes. I'm in charge of taste testing and of carrying the bag." Jongwoo pinched his arm behind his back and felt her cheeks warm. The proprietress laughed and slipped a small, free packet of Sweet Dream frosting into their bag with a wink. By the time they headed back toward Hogwarts, the sky had darkened and the castle was beginning to glow with scattered lights, a warm beacon against the coming night. "Looks like everyone's heading in," Cedric said, noticing the thinning crowd. Jongwoo agreed, the breeze lifting wisps of hair from her forehead. "Your report." "The owl should have delivered it by now," Cedric said, "so I'm officially free until I have to report back to the department tomorrow morning." He squeezed their joined hands. "If we're not in a rush, do you want to take the little path behind the greenhouses? I heard the moonflowers are blooming tonight." There was a small, romantic note in his suggestion. Jongwoo looked at his silhouette in the dimming light and nodded. "Okay." The path was indeed secluded, winding along the outer wall of the castle and skirting the humping willows' perimeter. Moonlight hadn't quite taken over yet. The last of the sunset held on the horizon. They walked in silence for a while, listening to distant sounds from the forbidden forest and the steady rhythm of their footsteps. "Today was fun," Cedric said suddenly, his voice clear in the quiet. Jongwoo answered, then added after a moment, "The candy was delicious and the beer was very cold." Cedric chuckled. "Just candy and beer, then?" She pursed her lips and laughed softly. "And free frosting." They walked on until Cedric stopped and turned to her. His twilight-lit eyes held a smile and a hint of expectation. Jongwoo felt her heartbeat grow loud in the hush around them. She hesitated, then tiptoed and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. "And this," she whispered, lowering her head and feeling her face flush. Cedric froze for a moment, stunned. Then joy and tenderness poured over him. He tightened his grip on her hand, and with his free hand, gently lifted her chin so she looked at him, his thumb brushing her cheek. "This," he said softly, leaning his forehead against hers, "is the best part." They stayed like that, foreheads touching, sharing small breaths as the twilight deepened. The only sound was the wind in the grass. After a long while he straightened, reinterlaced their fingers, and his voice slid back into its usual gentle tone. "All right, if we don't head back now, Filch will come prowling with a lamp. I don't want to lose points for Hufflepuff for being out after hours, especially now that I've graduated." They hurried along the path and reached the castle entrance in full darkness. At the fork that led to the Hufflepuff common room and the main castle corridors, they had to part ways. "Well, I'm heading back," Cedric said reluctantly, letting go of her hand. "Be careful," Jiangwu replied. He withdrew a small, glowing golden pyramid keychain from his pocket and placed it in her palm. "Here, use this to light your way when you walk back from the greenhouses at night. Next time I'll bring you a real pyramid stone." Jiangwu held the faintly glowing trinket, warmth spreading through her chest. "Okay. Good night, Wu," he said, looking at her with gentle eyes. "Good night, said," she answered. Only after his tall figure turned and slipped away toward the castle's main entrance did Jiangwu, smiling without quite knowing why, knock on the fat lady's portrait. The common room was still lively. Hannah and Susan rushed over, eyes bright. "Well, how was Hogsmeade?" Hannah demanded. Jiangwu handed over the big bag of honeydew sweets. "These are for you." Also, she shook the packet of spice seeds. "I restocked some experimental supplies." "Oh, don't try bribing us with candy," Susan laughed, but she was soon distracted by the sweets. Hannah, however, noticed the little glowing pyramid in Jiangwu's hand. "Oh, what's this? It's so cute. Did Cedric give it to you?" Jiangwu cupped it in her palm and couldn't hide her smile. Consider it part of my research sponsorship." After the teasing and laughter, Jiangwu hugged her seeds and notebooks and hurried up to the dormitory. She placed the small glowing pyramid on her bedside table and watched its soft light, thinking how lovely the end of the weekend felt, better than any bit of magic. Outside the window, the real moon had risen, silver light spilling over the Hogwarts grounds. There would be classes tomorrow, more experiments, and more troublesome orders from the Weasley brothers, but for now, Jiangwu's heart felt full, sweet and light, like butterbeer foam. Chapter 126, Morning Gossip. The Hufflepuff common room on Monday mornings always smelled faintly of toast and sleep. Hannah Abbott elbowed Susan Bones as she spooned honey into her porridge, eyes flicking to Jiangwu, who sat quietly eating oatmeal and occasionally flipping through a notebook. "Look at her," Hannah whispered, unable to hide a gossipy smile. "Since she came back yesterday, she's been zoning out and giggling at that glowing little pyramid keychain. I'd bet a box of chocolate frogs she did more than just buy spices and drink beer last night." Susan leaned in. "And did you see? Her ear tips are still red this morning. What exactly did Cedric do?" Their whispers, though soft, carried. Jiangwu forced a calm expression and focused on a chart titled Moonlight Lotus and Moonlight Absorption Rate, but her mind kept replaying the soft kiss and the warmth of foreheads touching on Twilight Path last night. She almost fed a spoonful of oatmeal to her nose before coughing to cover it, closing her notebook to avoid giving her friends any more ammo. Ernie Macmillan came by with a milk bottle, looking as if he hadn't quite recovered from a social embarrassment. "Morning," he offered weakly, deliberately avoiding Jiangwu's direction. An energetic owl slipped through the common room window and dropped a small parcel neatly beside Jiangwu's bowl. Fortunately, the bowl was almost empty. The parcel was wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with simple string. There was no sender's name, but Jiangwu recognized the tidy knot at a glance. Hannah and Susan fell silent, eyes wide. Even Ernie peered. Under their staring faces, Jiangwu kept her calm and opened it. Inside was nothing extravagant, a small, carefully wrapped piece of honey cake in parchment, flaky and inviting, with a folded note. The handwriting was strong and neat. "Good morning. A new product from Honeydukes. Thought you'd like it. P.S. The pyramid stone has been added to the next shopping list. CD." Her lips betrayed her with an uncontrollable smile. She pictured Cedric queuing at Honeydukes at dawn, then hurrying an owl to deliver it before she had breakfast. "Whoa," Hannah stretched the word, bumping Jiangwu playfully with her shoulder. "CD! Oh, honey cake! Oh, next shopping list! Merlin, this is too sweet." Susan covered her mouth, laughing. "Looks like a certain curse breaker not only knows how to break ancient curses, but how to deliver sweetness." Ernie glanced at the cake and managed a small grin. "At least this one won't make people sing." Jiangwu went bright red, folded the note, and tucked it into her pocket. She broke off a piece of cake and tasted it, sweet, soft, and very good. She pushed the rest toward her friends. "Share it," she said, trying to quiet them with food. The corner of the Hufflepuff table filled with the scent of honey and the low, knowing giggles of friends. Potion class with Professor Slughorn was after breakfast, shared with Ravenclaw. The professor, fond of his own importance, explained the day's waking potion with great enthusiasm, stressing the order of ingredients and the direction of the stirring. Jiangwu and Susan were partnered. Jiangwu measured ingredients and prepared sleeping pods with practiced, precise motions. But when she reached for the silver dagger to trim the stem of the moon petal, her hand hesitated. She thought of the cool, smooth piece of ice starwood Cedric had shown her, and her attention slipped for a heartbeat. The blade nicked a little more than intended, and a thin sliver of stem dropped into the gently heated cauldron. With a soft plop, the potion that should have been a clear sky blue took on a pearlescent sheen and sent up a few small silver bubbles. "Oh," Susan gasped. "Jiang, something's wrong." Professor Slughorn was passing by and leaned over, curious. He sniffed the brew. Miss Bones, Miss Wu, this color? A touch more creative than the standard recipe?" He didn't scold. He watched the silver bubbles with interest. "Interesting. Perhaps a bit more moon petal was added? Or the cauldron was slightly cool when it went in?" Embarrassed, Jiangwu admitted. Professor, I made a mistake cutting it." "Ah, it's all right, my dear. All right." Slughorn's eyes lit up. "Sometimes accidents lead to discoveries. Let me see." He dipped his wand into the potion and carefully tested it. Magic reaction. This has more of a soothing, calming quality than the usual waking potion, more serene than invigorating. Very interesting. Perhaps we might call it a serene waking potion. Miss Wu, would you write down your steps for me after class? Relieved, Jiangwu nodded. Yes, Professor. After class, she stayed to finish her notes while Susan left ahead of her. When she packed up and stepped out of the dungeon, someone was waiting at the door. Cedric. He leaned casually against the cold stone, as if he'd been there a while, holding a rolled copy of the Daily Prophet. "You're here?" Jiangwu asked, surprised. "Shouldn't you be at the ministry?" "My morning meeting got canceled at the last minute. I'll go over this afternoon." He straightened, took the bag of notes and textbooks from her as if it were the most natural thing, and smiled. "I heard a rumor about a little accident in potions that produced a new, improved potion." Jiangwu colored. "It wasn't an improvement. I just cut it wrong." "But Professor Slughorn liked it, didn't he?" Cedric fell into step beside her in the corridor. "Seems my girlfriend is not just a brilliant herbalist, but a potential potion innovator." When he said girlfriend, his voice was casual but unmistakably proud. Her heart skipped. "It was luck," she protested. "Luck is part of skill." He produced a small paper cup from the newspaper containing several chocolate-covered strawberries. For celebration, a new Honeydukes product, chocolate strawberries. She laughed at the sight of the bright red berries. "Are you feeding me like a niffler? Cake this morning, strawberries now." Cedric nodded solemnly, eyes bright. "I am feeding you. And I intend to keep feeding you, to keep Hufflepuff's most brilliant researcher well-fueled so she can invent more interesting things." Sunlight poured through the corridor windows, stretching long, close shadows. The herbal tang from potions still hung in the air, mingling with the chocolate and the clean scent of the person beside her. Jiangwu bit into a strawberry. The sweet, sour juice and rich chocolate melted together. For a moment, she decided that letting her mind drift in class hadn't been such a bad thing. At least it had produced honey cake, chocolate strawberries, and someone who always seemed to be passing by at the right time. Chapter 127, Charms Lesson Episode. The morning sun streamed through the round windows of the Hufflepuff common room, warming the soft carpet. The air still held the scent of toast and milk tea, but today there was also the murmur of whispers and the occasional shy glance toward one corner. Jiangwu sat in her usual spot with a bowl of oatmeal in front of her, taking small spoonfuls. Hannah and Susan sat on either side, wearing knowing smiles. "So," Hannah nudged Jiangwu with her elbow and dropped her voice. "What happened after Cedric walked you to the door yesterday? Did anything happen?" She blinked exaggeratedly. Susan leaned in. "We saw it in the entrance hall. He brushed that little leaf off your hair. He did it so casually." Jiangwu's earlobes pinked. She tried to keep a poker face, shoveled a large mouthful of porridge in, and mumbled, "Nothing happened. He just left. I don't believe it." Hannah dragged out the words. "Then why did you get another delivery this morning?" Her eyes landed on a warm blueberry scone in a delicate basket beside Jongwoo's hand. A small card tucked into the basket read, "Try the new item. Hope you like it. CD." This was the third day in a row. On the first day, it had been honey cake, the second chocolate-covered strawberries, and today a blueberry scone. Cedric Diggory seemed determined to surround his girlfriend with sweets. He was just passing by. Jongwoo began, but even she didn't sound convinced. From Hogsmeade to the Ministry, one doesn't pass by the Hogwarts kitchens every day. "Oh, passing by." Hannah and Susan chimed together, prompting Ernie at the next long table to glance over curiously. He was smarter this time and quickly lowered his head, gulping his pumpkin juice to avoid being drawn into another experiment. Jongwoo gave in to her friend's teasing and broke off half the scone, offering it to them. "Will eating this shut you up?" The scone was crisp-side and soft in the middle, sweet tart blueberries bursting in each bite. Hannah sighed in contentment. "If only I had a handsome, thoughtful senior bringing me treats every day." "You can always hope Professor Sprout feeds your biting cabbage a special fertilizer and it turns into a handsome young man," Susan replied earnestly. The girls dissolved into laughter. Breakfast was light and easy. Charms that morning was with Ravenclaw. Professor Flitwick was teaching the cheering charm, a spell that produced a short, intense feeling of happiness. "Wrist flicks, children. Light and quick. Remember your happiest memories and let that feeling infuse your magic. Oh, yes, just like that." Flitwick balanced on a stack of books, guiding them in his high, excited voice. The classroom filled with tentative attempts and the occasional burst of giggles. If the charm was too strong, it made people laugh uncontrollably. Jongwoo was paired with Susan and succeeded on her first try. Golden, warm flecks of light flew from her wand, landed on Susan, and made her break into a radiant smile. "Wow, Jung, that feels amazing," Susan laughed. "My turn." Susan concentrated, recalled a happy thought, and waved her wand. "Cheer up." Her spell was a touch enthusiastic. A dazzling spray of golden light shot from her wand, but missed Jongwoo, and instead hit a small spider tucked into a corner of the table, nibbling on spilled ink. The spider froze, then burst into a frantic tap dance. 8 legs flashing so fast they were nearly a blur, the tiny tap-tap-tap noise, both comical and just a little creepy. "Oh, Merlin," Susan cried, laughing. "Professor Flitwick, I'm sorry. I think I aimed at the wrong target." Flitwick leaned forward, amused rather than annoyed. "Miss Bones, it seems your understanding of happiness is very energetic. Next time, aim for your partner and not Miss Singh's pet spider, if it is a pet." Lisa Singh looked at her dancing pet with a rueful half-smile. "It just came to eat the ink, but it certainly looks very happy." The class filled with good-natured laughter. Jiangwu took her wand, carefully aimed at the spider, and murmured, "Finite incantatum." The tap dance stopped immediately. The spider spun twice, confusion written in its little posture, and then scuttled off. "Well done, Miss Wu," Flitwick praised. "A precise counter-charm." When the bell rang and everyone trooped out, the students chattered about the dancing spider. Jiangwu and Susan gathered their things and followed the flow of people. Just outside the classroom, they saw a familiar tall figure leaning against the opposite wall, as if waiting for someone. Cedric was wearing a neat traveling cloak and a smile. When he saw Jiangwu, he walked over as naturally as breathing. "Charms class finished?" He took the textbook from her without hesitation. "I was doing some follow-up nearby and heard it was entertaining." He had clearly heard about the dancing spider. Susan, grinning, couldn't resist reporting, "Cedric, you won't believe it. Zhang did a perfect finite incantatum for me just now." Cedric looked at Jiangwu with a proud smile. "I always knew she was brilliant." His gaze lingered on her face, and his hand came up, brushing a small ink smudge from her cheek with a fingertip. Sometimes she's so absorbed she doesn't notice these little things. The touch was casual and intimate. The warmth of his finger made Jiangwu's cheeks glow. Several classmates who hadn't yet left the corridor saw the scene and let out low, teasing laughs. Susan waved and pretended to remember something. "Oh, right, I've got something to do. I'll head back to the common room. Jiang, Cedric, Could you take her textbook for me?" With a laugh, she ran off. For a moment, only the two of them remained. Sunlight poured through the high windows in columns. "Why did you come by again?" Jiang Wu asked, though she already suspected the answer. Cedric smiled and pulled a small paper package from his cloak. "The house elves in the kitchens recommended this new cheesecake today. They said it's sweet without being cloying. I thought someone buried in research who might forget afternoon tea could use a little energy." He handed her the warm package, and with another casual, intimate movement, tucked a rebellious strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides, I didn't just pass by. I came to see you." His straightforwardness still caught her off guard, but it warmed her. She accepted the warm cheesecake and whispered, "Thank you. You really don't have to every day." "I want to," Cedric said, gentle but firm. "Seeing you enjoy things I like makes me happier than any curse I've ever broken." He hesitated, then added, almost sheepish, "I have to go to the ministry this afternoon. There's a new excavation site to evaluate. I might be busy the next few days." Jiang Wu nodded. "Be careful," she told him. "I will." He looked at her, then lowered his voice, a note of hopeful mischief in it. "So, before I go, could I get a little good luck charm in advance?" Jiang Wu paused, confused. Cedric grinned and pointed at his cheek. Her face flushed outright. She glanced left and right. A few students were still chatting at the end of the corridor, but none were paying attention. She stood on tiptoe and, quick as a blink, kissed him on the cheek. Then she ducked her head, her heart racing like a frantic niffler. Cedric froze for a beat, then an expression of pure contentment spread across his face as if she'd cast the strongest possible cheering charm. He squeezed her hand gently. "Received. This blessing will last me for days." A distant bell called students to their next lesson. "Go to class now," he said, releasing her hand, voice soft. "Remember to eat the cheesecake while it's warm. I'll be back." Jiang Wu nodded, clutching the warm package and her textbook, and walked toward her next class. After a few steps, she glanced back. Cedric was still standing there watching her. When he saw her look, he smiled and waved. Sunlight fell on him, warm and bright. Jiang Wu thought, maybe you don't need to learn the cheering charm at all. Sometimes it was already perfect. Chapter 128, the sequel to Calm Refresher. After Cedric left, Hogwarts felt noticeably quieter. Jiang Wu's days were still full, previewing any duty coursework, experiments in the greenhouse, and fulfilling the Weasley brothers' ever-growing list of orders. But the corridors seemed to be missing something. The absence nagged at her, subtle and persistent. The next morning, just as she sat down at the Hufflepuff table with a bowl of oatmeal, a familiar, bright-feathered owl swooped down and dropped a small package into her lap with precise accuracy. "Here we go again." Hannah leaned over, eyes sparkling. "What is it this time? A snack from Egypt? A souvenir from the pyramids?" Susan bit her spoon and laughed. Even though Cedric's gone, his feeding campaign apparently hasn't stopped. Jiang Wu unwrapped the parcel under her friend's teasing looks. Inside was no food but a finely made brass scale. One pan was whimsically shaped like a little flower pot, the other a standard weight pan. A neat, upright note was tucked beside it. "Good morning. Saw this in an antique shop in Diagon Alley and thought you'd like it. It can weigh seeds and double as a small ornament. Hope it pleases you more than dragon dung fertilizer. Missing you a little." C.D. Jiang Wu traced the cool brass and the tiny flower pot pan with her fingertips and smiled without meaning to. He always noticed details like this. "Wow, that's so thoughtful," Hannah exclaimed. "Better than food any day." "Yeah," Jiang Wu said softly, tucking the scale away. "He's very good at picking things." The unexpected gift was like a ray of sunlight, chasing away that vague morning emptiness and brightening her whole mood. Potion class only improved it. As always, Professor Slughorn sought her out eagerly. "Miss Jiang, my dear child," his round face beamed. "That accidental back improvement to the invigorating potion you produced the other day. Oh, I've taken to calling it the Serenity Invigorating Potion. I adjusted the moon thistle ratio and the timing of its addition, and the results are wonderfully stable. Madame Pomfrey tried it and praised it, said it's perfect for students suffering from exam insomnia." He held up a small bottle of blue liquid that shimmered like mother of pearl. "Look at that color. This could even make it into supplementary potion textbooks." Of course, he lowered his voice, and gave a conspiratorial wink. "I'll note that the inspiration came from a talented Hufflepuff student. Professor Sprout will be delighted." Jiang Wu felt a little embarrassed by his excitement. "I just cut the herb wrong. Inspiration often comes from accidents, my dear," Slughorn declared, clapping her shoulder. 10 points to Hufflepuff for this outstanding mistake. Laughter and warm congratulations rippled through the class. Ernie even mustered a direct look and a big thumbs up as she left. Hugging her textbooks, buoyed by bonus points in the new brass scale, Jiang Wu planned to head to the greenhouse that afternoon to use the scale to measure pyramid sand for the sunfinch sprouts. At the corner of the corridor, another owl arrived on cue, dropping a second parcel into her hands. This one contained a small packet of unfamiliar tea that gave off a fresh, exotic scent, tropical, a little animalic. The attached note read, "On a mission, I found an interesting magical plant. Its dried leaves, brewed as tea, are said to slightly sharpen perception of magical fluctuations. Want to try? Be careful. It's strong. CD," she smiled. Was Cedric going to wear out the owl postman? Chang! Hannah and Susan caught up behind her. Seeing the new package, they weren't surprised this time. "What is it now?" Hannah asked. "Tea," Jiang Wu said. "Oh, how thoughtful," Hannah said dramatically. "Cedric's making sure you can feel his presence at all times." Susan peered at the packet. "Enhances magic perception? That's practical. Much better than our boyfriends who only ask, 'What's the weather like tomorrow?'" The three of them laughed as they walked toward the Great Hall for lunch. Even though he wasn't there in person, the constant little reminders from afar, small, thoughtful things shared across distance, felt comforting. For the moment, that was enough. Chapter 129, Tea Tasting. Under the moon, night fell again. In the third greenhouse, Jiang Wu weighed a small pinch of golden pyramid sand on her delicate brass scales and sprinkled it evenly around the sunfinch seedling. After a few days of moonlight essence, the little sprout had unfurled a second pair of nearly transparent golden leaf petals, each no bigger than a fingernail. Liquid sunlight seemed to flow through the veins, giving off a steady, pleasant warmth. The seedling clearly liked the mixed soil with pyramid sand. Whenever she scattered fresh grains, the leaves would tremble as if stretching in contentment. When the seedling was settled, Jiang Wu took out the packet of enchanted tea leaves Cedric had sent. She pinched a few between her fingers and brought them to her nose. The aroma was fresh and slightly sharp, invigorating. She heated water with a small charm, carefully controlling the temperature so as not to damage the tea's magical structure, and brewed a single cup. The liquor was a clear, golden-green amber. Steam rose, and the wet aroma was richer than the dry leaves promised. She blew on it and sipped. A pleasant bitterness arrived first, then sweetness that followed almost immediately. A coolness ran from her throat to the top of her head, clearing her mind like a bell ringing. Even more extraordinary, when she closed her eyes, she could feel the life force of the surrounding plants with unusual clarity, the slow, lazy rhythm of the devil's snare, the faint, greedy suction of the moon lotus as it drew in moonlight, and the warm, vigorous pulse from the sunfinch seedling beside her. This tea was something special. She carefully noted the experience and the changes in her magical perception. A gentle tapping at the greenhouse door pulled her attention away. Cedric's eagle owl was pecking at the glass, a familiar letter tied to its leg. Jiang Wu opened the window and the owl hopped inside, rubbing its head against her palm before offering its leg. The envelope was a bit thicker this time. Jiang read the note as she sat on the sill. Cedric's handwriting was neat and easy to picture, him bent over a fire or a lamp copying runes. The letter read, "Jiang, I hope the tea is good. Things are going well here, though it's a bit tedious. Most of my time is spent copying runes from ancient stone walls. I've enclosed a page from my manuscript. Can you guess what spell this is?" While on night watch, the stars were especially bright, and they made me think of that little sprout in your greenhouse that needs moonlight. And well, they made me think of you. The temperature swings here are extreme, so take an extra robe when you leave the greenhouse at night. P.S. The owl complained about the increased workload, so I promised it some special Egyptian owl nuts next time. CD, a page of parchment was tucked in, several complex ancient runes copied with precise strokes, annotated by Cedric's careful conjectures. Jiang Wu imagined him squinting by the firelight, feeling the desert night in his words, the sharp stars, the sudden cold. She found herself smiling and reaching for a quill and some parchment. Her reply was quick and warm. Said, "The tea is delicious and remarkably effective. I can practically hear the devil's snare snoring now. The scales are very practical and beautiful." Professor Slughorn turned that potion class accident into the Serenity Stimulant and awarded Hufflepuff 10 points. The sunfinch has grown its second pair of leaves and is stable. Thank you for the sand. The runes look like a variant of a protective spell, maybe related to Peaceful Guardian, but I'm not certain. The starry sky sounds lovely. Wear more layers. Owl nuts sound great. P.S. You're welcome to write anytime, owl complaints or no. J. She rolled the reply, tied it to the owl's leg, and fed the bird a few of her roasted grass seeds. The owl hooted contentedly, flapped out into the night, and was gone. Jiang Wu sat back down beside the sunfinch, paging through Cedric's manuscript under the moonlight. The desert night and the Hogwarts night felt linked by the paper and the words that crossed the distance between them. She took another sip of the now cool tea, surrounded by the quiet, vigorous rhythm of the greenhouse. The warmth in her chest, the soft, persistent longing that came with the letter, bloomed a little more. Next to her notes, the Egyptian manuscript lay open, full of the clumsy, earnest observations of a curse-breaker far from home. Chapter 130, Gemini's Emergency Communication. Cedric's eagle owl arrived in the great hall almost exactly when the breakfast bell rang. It wasn't its usual sprightly self. It looked droopy, its flight path wobbling as if resentful. It dropped a much larger than usual parcel with a heavy thump onto the table in front of Jiang Wu, then landed weakly nearby, fixed her with an accusing stare, and let out a long, wronged hoot. The package was heavier than it looked and oddly shaped. Merlin! Hannah's eyes went wide. Did Cedric send a piece of a pyramid this time? Susan poked at the parcel. It doesn't feel like stone. It's soft. Jiang Wu was puzzled for a moment, then reached into a small pouch of specially prepared seeds she always carried and offered them to the exhausted bird. "You've done well," she said. The eagle owl gave her a mournful look, bowed its head, and began to eat ravenously, as if turning its indignation into appetite. There was no note pinned to the outside. Jiang Wu untied the string carefully. Inside was a neatly folded, thick wool cloak in a deep night sky blue. Pinned to its collar was a small brass brooch shaped like a miniature scale, one pan holding a tiny flower pot and the other a weight, the tiny copy of the scale he had given her yesterday. The cloak was unbelievably soft and warm and carried a faint, dry scent she didn't recognize, like desert wind and sun. Tucked underneath the cloak was a bag of plump Egyptian owl nuts and a note. The handwriting was a little hurried. "Wu, the wind was fierce during watch last night. I remembered you saying it gets cold walking back from the greenhouse. I bought this at the market here. The wool is very thick. I hope it fits." The owl strongly protested being used as a courier, nuts included to mollify it, and my apologies. The mission is entering a critical phase, so communications may be unstable for the next few days. Don't worry. Thinking of you. C.D. Jiang. Wu smiled despite herself. She could picture Cedric's eagle owl flapping and protesting as he wrote. She lifted the cloak and, on impulse, draped it over her shoulders. It fit surprisingly well. The thick wool shut out the last of the morning chill in the great hall and wrapped her in warmth, the distant scent he'd mentioned tucked into the fibers. What a gorgeous cloak! Hannah admired, already envious. Cedric's too thoughtful, sending clothes because he was afraid you'd be cold. It suits you, Susan agreed. It must be a lot warmer than our school robes. The eagle owl finished the seeds, nibbled a few Egyptian nuts, hooted twice, and rubbed its head against Jiang Wu's hand as if to signal it needed to return. She stroked its smooth feathers. "Be careful on your way," she murmured. It flapped and flew off. Cloak wrapped around her shoulders, the heavy bag of owl nuts and the other gifts on her lap. Jiang Wu felt full, a quiet, solid reassurance. Even thousands of miles away, he could still take care of her and even think to placate her owl colleague. For a few moments she felt content and warm. The peace did not last. That morning in History of Magic, as Professor Binns droned on in his flat, unvarying tone about the goblin rebellions, a flash of color exploded into the classroom. An iridescent, fast-moving owl barreled in, completely ignoring the lecturing professor, and dropped a package smoldering with colored smoke right onto Jiang Wu's open textbook. The parcel sputtered and produced a few sharp, crackling pops. Then the smoke coalesced into several large, shifting words. Urgent! Jiang! Return to the lab immediately! GF. Every student in the room snapped awake at once and turned to Jiang Wu and the hissing package. Professor Binns stilled. His pale, translucent figure floated nearer, squinting at the colored smoke letters. Weasley. Another related event to the Goblin Rebellions? He mumbled, then altered his cadence and continued the lecture as if nothing had happened. Jiang Wu's face flamed. She tried to extinguish the smoke, but it was stubborn. The message repeated 3 times before finally dissipating, leaving a slightly charred parcel and the tangy smell of fireworks. Hannah and Susan shook with suppressed laughter. Ernie looked as if the package might leap up and sing. When class finally ended, Jiang Wu grabbed the scorch-marked parcel and practically fled. In the greenhouse, she opened it. Inside was a flamboyantly written letter. Each letter seemed to tap dance, and several small bottles filled with absurd, even more bizarrely colored liquids. To the esteemed, the magnificent, and our only hope, Jiang, your initial sample has been received. It has undergone rigorous internal testing. Fred's head turned bright green and now insists on performing an enthusiastic solo bohemian dance, while George was compelled to sing A Pot of Hot Love. For half an hour straight, the effects are astonishing. But, we discovered the trigger for Sunshine Joyful Song is a touch overzealous. It reacts to any music it hears, even the background music on the radio. Consequently, our product tester, poor Lee Jordan, ended up serenading his moss terrarium with Today, Sunny with Cloudy Periods. We urgently need a way to stabilize it. P.S. Attached is Dandelion Blast Shampoo 2.0 Concentrate, with your suggested euphoric residue added. We hope it promotes optimistic hair follicle regeneration. Please test for safety. Extremely urgent. Your loyal and currently wildly dancing-haired business partners, Fred and the howling George next door. At the bottom of the letter was a crude ink self-portrait of Fred with green hair flailing wildly. Jiang Wu read it and couldn't help laughing despite herself. The Weasley twins had a knack for turning her methodical experiments into gloriously chaotic spectacles. She picked up one of the bottles labeled Dandelion Blast 2.0, a fluorescent yellow liquid that bubbled restlessly. She sighed, shrugged into dragonhide gloves, and opened her lab notebook. It looked like this afternoon's quiet was going to be sacrificed to another emergency from the twins. She glanced down at her deep blue cloak and felt the little prick of irritation at being interrupted soften. With that warmth on her shoulders and the thought that someone miles away had remembered the owl and the cold, she felt oddly bolstered. Even if Fred and George managed to blow the roof off the place, she thought she could face whatever mess they threw at her. Chapter 131, An Unexpected Return. Cedric had warned that communications might be unstable, but Jiang Wu hadn't expected unstable to mean this. She was fully geared up, standing over the glowing, constantly bubbling Dandelion Blast 2.0, ready for the first safety test, when the greenhouse door eased open. She didn't bother to look up. She assumed Professor Sprout had come to check on her and called without turning. "Professor, could you hand me the dragonhide gloves over there? This stuff is reacting a bit violently." Footsteps approached, and a large hand, knuckles nicked, streaked with fresh scrapes and desert dust, picked up the thick dragonhide gloves from the other end of the table and handed them to her. These hands didn't belong to anyone she expected. Jiang Wu looked up and met a pair of smiling, dust-streaked gray eyes. Cedric stood in the doorway, still wearing his travel cloak from the mission, hood down behind his head. His hair was a little messy and there was obvious fatigue on his face, but his eyes were bright and fixed on her, a gentle smile on his lips. "You?" Jiang Wu was completely stunned. The tweezers in her hand nearly slipped into the bubbling solution. "Didn't you say the mission was at a critical stage and communication was unstable?" "Yes." Cedric nodded and, as if it was the most natural thing, took the dangerous tweezers from her fingers and set them safely aside. "So I fixed the critical problems as quickly as I could, left the follow-up recording to my teammates, and asked to return early. He spoke lightly, but Jiangwu could imagine the efficiency and the workload that implied. I apparated to Hogsmeade and ran all the way here. I thought, maybe I could surprise you. His gaze dropped to her cloak, the dark blue wool one he'd sent her, and he smiled at how it softened her cheeks. The longing in his eyes nearly overflowed. Looks like my owls did their job. Didn't want you to get cold. It was a genuine surprise. Warmth and joy flooded Jiangwu. She noticed the fine desert sand clinging to his eyelashes, the tiredness in his expression, and the brightness that came to his face at seeing her. Suddenly, the twins' urgent order and the dangerous shampoo concoction felt far less important. "Have you had lunch?" she asked, a little dazed and unsure what else to say. Cedric chuckled, his voice slightly hoarse from fatigue, but still pleasant. "No, I thought I'd come back and eat with you." He paused, then added, "The house elves nearly dropped a pot of soup when I appeared out of nowhere, but they wrapped me some sandwiches." He pulled a plump, oil paper-wrapped package from an inner pocket of his cloak. "Eat together?" The greenhouse seemed to brighten, so much so that the young sunfinch seedling's leaves seemed to sparkle a little more. Jiangwu smiled and nodded. "Hmm?" They abandoned the workbench and sat at the small wooden table in the corner. Cedric was starving and ate the sandwich hungrily, between mouthfuls telling amusing stories from the desert mission. How a teammate had been chased all over by a cursed beetle disguised as a rock, or how they bribed a tight-lipped local guide with an entire barrel of iced pumpkin juice. Jiangwu listened quietly, handing him water and pushing the ham slices he liked closer. Watching him eat, a sense of comfort and contentment swelled in her. A true surprise, she realized, wasn't a distant gift, but the giver standing right in front of you. When they'd finished their makeshift lunch, Cedric rolled up his sleeves. "Well, it looks like my timing was perfect. Do you need a temporary assistant for anything? Handling dragon manure fertilizer? Feeding the biting cabbages?" He glanced at the still bubbling fluorescent yellow liquid and raised an eyebrow. "Or, dealing with this very Weasley-looking thing?" Jiangwu remembered the interrupted emergency test. With Cedric by her side, she felt far more confident tackling the twins' chaos. She handed him Fred's letter with the mad doodle on it. "This," she said, "the trigger for Sunshine's Serenade is too random. They're losing their minds. I need an absolutely quiet, music-free environment to test the stability improvements." Cedric skimmed the letter and burst out laughing when he reached Fred's self-portrait. "Those two rascals? An absolutely quiet environment?" He thought for a moment, then snapped his fingers. "I know the perfect place. The room of requirement. It can conjure a soundproof room that blocks most magical interference. I used to go there to study before my OWLs. "Brilliant." Jiangwu's eyes lit up. They packed their latest samples and recording gear and headed up to the 8th floor. Cedric paced back and forth 3 times in front of the tapestry, showing Barnabas the Barmy being taught to dance by trolls, concentrating on, "I need an absolutely quiet, soundproof room for magical experiments." A door appeared smoothly in the wall. The room beyond was small, its walls plain and undecorated, and so silent that you could hear your own heartbeat. Jiangwu set to work, while Cedric sat to the side, taking out his curse-breaking notes to organize, glancing up at her now and then with a gentle look. In that extreme silence, Jiangwu's senses sharpened. She tweaked the formula, adding a pinprick of starlight wood powder and using the finely calibrated scale Cedric had given her for precise measurements. Time ticked away. Finally, she produced a small batch of the improved syrup, a subtler color than the original dazzling gold, with a pearlescent shimmer. "Okay," she said, taking a breath. "I need a volunteer." Cedric snapped his notebook shut and stood without hesitation. "I'll do it." "There might be unknown effects," Jiangwu warned, anxious. "I trust your skill." Cedric smiled, lowered his head, and opened his mouth. "Besides, it's an honor to contribute to your work." Jiangwu's cheeks warmed. She scooped a tiny spoonful of syrup and fed it to him, then watched nervously as he tasted it. Cedric considered it, then said, "Tastes better than before. Not so cloying." He waited, showing no urge to burst into song. Jiangwu produced a small trinket she'd filched from the twins that played faint background music on its own and switched it on. A cheerful tune filled the utterly silent room. Still, Cedric showed no reaction. Jiang Wu's eyes lit up. Success! She turned off the trinket, thought for a moment, and hummed a simple Chinese folk tune. On the third note, Cedric's eyes widened slightly, and an expression of genuine pleasure crossed his face. He didn't sing the way Ernie might, loud and uncontrollable, but he effortlessly and gently joined her, humming the rest of the melody in a pleasant low voice. When they stopped, he blinked, laughed, and said, "Wow, that's strange, not compulsive. I just naturally wanted to hum along. And it feels really good." Jiang Wu was ecstatic. The tweak had worked. The trigger was no longer random, but required a conscious, joyful musical prompt, and the effect was shared musical pleasure rather than forced solo singing. She grabbed Cedric's arm impulsively. "It worked! Did you hear? It needs a prompt, and the effect is shared." Cedric took her hand, looking at her face alight with triumph, his eyes full of pride. "I heard. You always manage to work miracles." He squeezed her hand. "To celebrate this historic breakthrough, may I have the honor of inviting you to dinner? I promise it won't be sandwiches this time." Outside the greenhouse, the sky was turning a warm gold red with sunset. Inside the room of requirement, the silence was gone, replaced by the hum of success and a soft, comfortable warmth. Jiang Wu looked at Cedric's silhouette, softened by the dying light, and nodded eagerly. "Yes." Chapter 132, Library Appointments. Cedric's sudden return was like a pebble tossed into the calm lake of Hogwarts, small, joyful ripples spreading out through the castle. Reality, however, soon reminded the two recently reunited students that they both had a mountain of work to catch up on. Jiang Wu's notebook was a tangle of lists, a NEWT essay for ancient runes, Professor Sprout's report on herb growth cycles, and the Weasley twins' exploding hair rescue plan, which felt dangerously close to a death sentence. Cedric produced a thick stack of on-site curse-breaking records from his dragonhide satchel. They all needed organizing and filing. "It seems," Cedric said, looking at the tower of parchment before them with a helpless smile, "our first official date can only be at the library." Jiang Wu nodded, secretly delighted. Even studying together in the library beat slogging through everything alone, especially with him. They picked a quiet corner by a window, hemmed in by tall, heavy shelves. The air smelled of old paper and dust in that comforting way only libraries do. Madame Pince patrolled nearby like a hawk, her sharp eyes sweeping the room for anyone who dared disrespect the books. At first, the atmosphere was strictly academic. Quills scratched on parchment, pages turned softly. Jiang Wu bent over her ancient runes, brows knitted in concentration. Cedric scanned his records, occasionally using the tip of his wand to illuminate a complex rune for a closer, three-dimensional look. After a while, he tapped Jiang Wu's arm and slid a small note toward her. "Need help? That symbol looks like a variant of the ancient Egyptian protection rune. The third stroke should go up, not down." Jiang Wu checked her textbook and found he was right. She smiled gratefully and mouthed, "Thank you." "You're welcome. Your quiet date assistant is at your service." Cedric lowered his voice, his eyes bright. Later, Jiang Wu glanced up from her herbology notes to find Cedric frowning at a particularly smudged on-site record. She thought a moment, wrote a note, and pushed it across. "The word blackened on line 5 looks like scarab, but it may be distorted by a curse. Try revealing it with restoration ink. I brought some revealing potion." Cedric's face lit up. He took a tiny crystal vial from her, held a drop to the blurred letters, and watched as the ink cleared into a distorted scarab. "Brilliant," he whispered, unable to hide his relief. "You saved me. I'd have been guessing at that all night." "The feeling's mutual," Jiang Wu said, a touch of smugness at the corner of her mouth. "The quiet researcher partner is doing well." The easy, silent exchange, passing notes, sharing tools, correcting each other's work, felt warm and companionable. They were two allies sharing a private language amid the hush of the stacks. Then the calm was broken. Ernie Macmillan wandered into their aisle, hunting a book on common magical pests in their control. He spotted Cedric at once. His expression went from eager to flustered in a heartbeat. "Diggory," he called, far too loudly. Madame Pince's head snapped up. Ernie went pale and lowered his voice. "You're back? I didn't expect." Cedric gave him a quick, whispered greeting. Ernie's gaze darted between the two of them, taking in the piles of notes and the furtive little notes they passed. An awkward, self-satisfied smile creased his face. "Oh, right. I won't disturb your studying," he stammered and turned to leave, but his elbow caught a heavy tome on the shelf. A compendium of medieval European dragonhide tanning. The book wobbled and toppled. Cedric reacted without thinking. He flicked his wand and cast a levitation charm. The massive volume stopped inches from Ernie's head and hovered like a brick suspended in midair. Ernie went white. Madame Pince glided over silent as a shadow, her face thunderous. "Mr. Macmillan," she hissed. "No loud noises in the library, and absolutely no bumping shelves. 5 points from Hufflepuff for your clumsiness." She turned then to Cedric, a little less severe but still strict. "The levitation charm was well executed, Mr. Diggory, but magic is not to be used in the library unless it is an emergency. Do not let it happen again." With a flick, she sent the book back to its place. Ernie slunk away on tiptoe, crestfallen. For a moment the corner was tense. Then Cedric and Jiang Wu exchanged looks and stifled laughs, shoulders shaking as they tried to keep quiet. After that scare, they were extra cautious. No wand twitches, no loud rustling. They worked diligently until the sun shifted and the afternoon light slanted gold over their table. When they reached a stopping point, Cedric packed his things and slid another note to her. "Though very quiet, this was the best library meeting I've ever attended. Can I book this seat again next time?" Jiang Wu read it, smiled, and wrote back. "Yes, but you have to bring your own snacks and be responsible for blocking Madame Pince's line of sight." Cedric looked up, grinned, and gave her a mock salute. As they left, Madame Pince, uncharacteristically approving, nodded at the apparently industrious pair, especially at Cedric, whom she held in high regard. Outside, they breathed in the cool air and let out a long, shared laugh. "I swear," Cedric said, laughing, "I could hear a quill drop in there. It was more nerve-wracking than dealing with curses in a pyramid." "But very effective," Jiang Wu answered, smiling. "Thanks. The hardest part of the essay is done." "Same here. Filing's half finished." Cedric took her satchel with a smooth, familiar gesture. "So to celebrate our successful quiet date and not getting ejected by Madame Pince, shall we do something? Not so quiet? Greenhouse, I promised that little sprout it's missed its researcher." "Good idea." Jiang Wu nodded. They left the hush of the library behind and walked toward the greenhouses, leaving the stacks and Madame Pince's sharp gaze for the warm, earthy smells of plants and sunlight. Maybe the best dates weren't about going somewhere special at all, but simply being with the right person, turning ordinary things into something worth smiling about. Chapter 133, Weasley New Product Review Meeting. Cedric's return felt like a spoonful of joy. Even Hogwarts' dusty corridors seemed a little brighter. That cheer didn't last long. The Weasley brothers' owl burst into the Great Hall again, this time trailing a faint burnt smell and dropping a package that was still quietly smoking. "Merlin's beard," Hannah muttered, moving her bowl of milk porridge further away. "What have they come up with now?" Jiang Wu prodded the still hissing parcel with her fork. The package popped open and out sprang a huge, pointed wizard's hat in ridiculously bright, constantly shifting patterns. Crookedly embroidered on the tip were the words, "Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, latest trial product." A slightly singed parchment floated down behind it. The letter read, "Dear Jiang and her boyfriend who always finds treasures. Given your successful fix of the singing toffee, random playback glitch, Fred can now only serenade the toilet with love songs with excellent results. Our confidence has soared. We're proud to introduce a brand new concept product, the Emotion Sensing Hat. It changes color and pattern according to the wearer's mood. Currently in testing, the effect may be slightly erratic. We kindly request that both of you be the first to try it and give us feedback. A trial version is enclosed, absolutely safe, probably. Your crazy collaborators, George and Fred, who is currently holding a solo concert in the bathroom." The hat flickered from a furious red, anger, to a strange fluorescent green, disgust, emojis of displeasure flashing across its fabric. Cedric and Jiang Wu exchanged an exasperated look. "Afternoon tea plans are canceled," Cedric said. Cedric picked up the hat. It softened to a gentle pink and began to sprout tiny hearts. Jiang Wu blinked. "It seems to like you." "Maybe I'm just happy to be back," Cedric grinned and handed the hat to Jiang Wu. The instant it touched her, the hat went a deep, focused blue, decorated with a scale-like pattern and faint herb silhouettes. Wow, Hannah breathed. It really does read minds. Looks like it catches strong emotional spikes and manifests them, Jiangwu said, slipping into analysis mode. But the stability, ugh! The hat suddenly flashed a blazing gold and faintly and only to the wearer began to play a very soft chorus of A Pot of Hot Love. Cedric took it off Jiangwu's head and the music stopped. Clearly needs work, he said, but the idea's interesting. They decided to test it away from other students and took the hat to the greenhouse. The walk became a live demonstration. When they passed Peeves, the hat snapped to vigilant red and emitted a sharp, air raid-like screech that sent the poltergeist skittering away. When they crossed Professor Snape, it went dead black, and a single line of text drifted across it. I want to go home. Snape snorted coldly and kept walking. When a gaggle of first years bounded by, the hat erupted in rainbow colors and showered tiny confetti, much to the squealing delight of the children. By the time they reached the greenhouse, the hat looked drained, a tired grayish-white with one corner flopping. Cedric set it on a workbench. The Weasley brothers need to narrow the sensing range or add a switch, he suggested. Agreed. Jiang Wu opened her notebook and began to list the behaviors. And the materialized effects need to be subtler. Wearing this feels like putting an emotional billboard on your head. A worried face poked in at the greenhouse door. Ernie Macmillan hurried in. Diggory, Jiang, have you seen my leaf? It's gone missing again. His sentence broke off when his eyes landed on the hat. The hat reacted to his anxiety by turning an earthy, fidgety yellow with a large ticking clock motif across it. Ernie stared. Why is this hat more anxious than I am? Leaf was soon located contentedly buried under a pile of quiet umbrella fungi. After a few more rich field tests, Jiangwu labeled the Weasley brothers' emotion-sensing hat interesting concept, too high risk, needs major adjustments, and packed it back with 3 full pages of observations. They sent it back to the joke shop by Owl. Cedric watched the bird fly off, carrying the heavy report, and smiled. Honestly, I think curse-breaking might be more reassuring than dealing with Weasley products. Jiangwu nodded in complete agreement. To deal with George's wildly unmanageable hair, Jiangwu and Cedric decided to try their luck in the kitchen, hoping to find natural ingredients with calming properties. Cedric, used to the routine, scratched the pear pattern on the door, and it slid open soundlessly. Warm, food-scented air rushed out, and dozens of house elves bustled about. The moment they saw Cedric, several ran over, chattering excitedly. Mr. Diggory, you're back! Do you need a house elf to make something? Scones? Cake? A stew? This is Miss Jiang. She comes for fresh herbs all the time. Cedric smiled and explained why they were there. They needed anything that might calm or slow excessive growth. The house elves erupted into lively suggestions. Cabbage juice, that might do it. No, sour lemon peel is stronger. Maybe a drop of iced penguin tears? A timid elf offered. As the discussion grew more animated, an accident happened. Squeaky, a house elf stretching for a jar of powdered sleeping pods on the top shelf, slipped. The platter of freshly whipped snow-white cream he was carrying flew from his hands and splatted directly onto the head of the one poltergeist who happened to be striding in at that exact moment, Peeves. Time seemed to freeze. Peeves, usually a blur of mischief, stood there transformed into a giant cream ghost, all white with only 2 dark, swirling eyes visible. For a second he was stunned, then his laughter burst out, manic and triumphant. Wah! He began tearing cream from himself and flinging it everywhere. Cream war. Lord Peeves declares the kitchen a cream battlefield. The first dollop hit an elf chopping onions. The poor creature exploded into tears. Whether from the onion or the cream, it was hard to tell. The second flew straight for Cedric and Jiang. Cedric reacted instantly, yanking Jiang behind a heavy counter and casting a protective charm. The flying cream hit an invisible barrier and slid harmlessly to the floor. Chaos followed. Cream splattered the walls. House elves shrieked and scattered. Pots and ladles clattered. Peeves cartwheeled through the air, tossing globes of cream and singing a ridiculous song. Cream flies and flies. Peeves grins with glee. Hits a house elf. Hits Diggory. We have to stop him, Jiang shouted from behind the table, blinking cream from her lashes. Agreed, Cedric said, surveying the mess with a lopsided grin. His eyes landed on a pot of wilted mandrake seedlings the elves were about to toss, underdeveloped, barely grown. An idea struck him. Jiang, do you remember how to calm a mandrake quickly? Jiang's face brightened. I do, but it needs careful control. I'll distract him. You get it ready. Cedric swung out from behind the counter and yelled, Hey, Peeves! Look over here. Your most hated Filch is here. He hadn't seen Filch at all, but the lie worked. Peeves turned his head. At that instant, Jiang scooped up the pot of limp seedlings, judging the angle and force in a heartbeat. She tugged one halfway out of its soil. The poor little mandrake let out a thin, high wail, faint because it was underdeveloped, but piercing at such close range. Wah! Peeves froze, mid-throw. The sudden, unexpected cry slowed him. He even forgot the last dollop of cream perched on his head. Now, Cedric called. He cast a freezing charm that hit the huge, slick puddle of cream under Peeves' hovering feet. The cream snapped solid. Peeves slipped, lost his balance, and with an indignant ouch, he came down like a giant bowling ball, sliding across the frozen cream until he slammed into a sack of flour. The impact exploded a cloud of white dust. When the powder settled, there sat Peeves, covered first in cream and now in a thick coat of flour, transformed into a ridiculous, motionless cream and flour snowman, only his eyes blinking angrily. Silence held for a heartbeat, then one brave house elf let out a small chuckle. Laughter broke loose across the kitchen like a flood. Cedric and Jiang climbed out from behind the counter, faces splattered with cream and flour, and couldn't help but laugh too as they looked at their immobilized prize. It seems our emergency rescue involved dealing with Peeves, Cedric said, still grinning as he brushed flour from Jiang's hair. And, Jiang added, picking up the jar of powdered sleeping pods that had started all this from beside the flour sack, we may have accidentally found something that could help George's hair. The cream war ended with the house elves escorting Peeves out on broom handles. He grumbled the whole way, weighed down by cream and flour so that his movements were comically slow. Covered in mess and smelling faintly of baking, Jiang and Cedric left the kitchen with unexpected supplies and the warm, ridiculous memory of a victory won with a bit of quick thinking and a lot of cream. Chapter 135, Quidditch Fieldside Special Training, Additional Update. The news of Cedric's return spread through Hogwarts like wind through grass. It reached the Hufflepuff Quidditch captain almost at once. She practically blocked the Great Hall entrance, eyes bright. Diggory, thank goodness you're back, she cried, grabbing his arm. We're playing Ravenclaw next week. Our current seeker, he's always a beat too slow. Could you help him with some special training? Just a few days. Use your experience from when you caught the snitch. Cedric, who loved Quidditch as much as anyone, couldn't refuse that kind of enthusiasm. He agreed at once, and before long, Jiang Wu's afternoons gained a new appointment, watching Cedric act as a temporary coach on the Quidditch pitch. The weather was perfect, a gentle breeze, bright sun. The pitch stretched out vivid and wide. Hufflepuff's seeker, a nervous second year, hung on his broom and looked to Cedric expectantly. Cedric stood at the sideline rather than on a broom. Don't be nervous, he said, voice calm and clear. You don't catch the snitch by simply charging after it. You learn to anticipate, feel its rhythm. It likes to change direction suddenly, but there's an almost imperceptible cue before it does. He drew a small golden ball from his sleeve and with his wand, made it weave and dart through the air like a tiny snitch. He demonstrated feints and abrupt turns, showing how the snitch's flight could be read. Jiang Wu sat in the stands nearby, trying to reorganize her herbology notes. Their study had been interrupted earlier by a run-in with Peeves, and glanced up occasionally. Cedric, lit by sunlight, looked particularly tall. He spoke with focus. His gray eyes shone with that familiar love for the sport. The young seeker watched every motion and tried to follow his guidance in the air. As Jiang Wu watched, her attention wandered. When Cedric explained, his fingers unconsciously traced the snitch's path. The slight furrow of his brow made him look thoughtful in a way she liked. When he smiled approvingly at the boy's imitation, she found herself smiling too. A gust of wind scattered several sheets of parchment detailing the properties of sleeping pod powder from her table toward the pitch. Ah! Jiang Wu jumped up to catch them. Cedric saw at once. He raised his wand without taking his eyes off Jiang Wu, murmuring, Axio! The tip of his wand seemed to lock onto the different sheets at once. The parchments, as if tugged by invisible threads, changed course and flew neatly back to the table, landing in a tidy stack. The whole motion was lightning fast and smooth. The young seeker gaped, lost his focus, and almost toppled from his broom. For a moment, Cedric looked sheepish, then put his wand away and smiled at Jiang Wu. "Ah, occupational hazard," he said. "When I've been disarming curses, I often have to control several dangerous objects at once. I'm just used to it." Jiang Wu looked at the neat stack of parchment and felt a private thrill. She'd known Cedric was remarkable, but watched like this, seeing the ease with which he handled things, she was still moved. The seeker steadied himself, flew a little lower, and looked up at Cedric with open admiration. "Senior Diggory, that was so cool! Could you use it to catch the snitch?" Cedric chuckled. "Probably not. The snitch wouldn't answer an Accio, but the principle's similar. Pay attention to everything on the field and pick out the most important target." He patted the boy's shoulder. "All right, take a break. Try to feel the rhythm I talked about." He joined Jiang Wu on the stands, sweat cooling on his forehead. She handed him a clean handkerchief and a water bottle. "Thanks," he said, taking a long drink. "Coaching is more tiring than playing, I think." "You explained it well," she told him sincerely. "He seems to understand a lot more." "I hope so," Cedric said, watching the pitch. "Seekers depend on instinct and split-second choices. That's the hardest part to teach." The sun warmed them. The seeker practiced below. Beyond the pitch, the black lake and the shadowed forbidden forest cut the horizon. The breeze carried the smell of grass and turned the pages of Jiang Wu's notes on the bench. "Oh, this reminds me," Cedric said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He produced a tiny wooden model of a snitch and handed it to her. It was no bigger than a fingernail. Its wings were finely carved and trembled so subtly it seemed alive. "It doesn't fly," Cedric explained, "but the wings flutter faster when it touches something warm. I thought you'd like it." She cupped it in her palm. The little snitch seemed to sense her heat and its wings fluttered faster, a tiny, cheerful vibration. Her chest warmed at the simple, unexpected gift. "I love it," she said, closing her hand gently around the model. "Thank you." They sat quietly, watching the practice and casually talking about training, potions, and their experiences at the pyramid. No words were needed most of the time. Simply sharing the sunlight and the breeze beside each other was enough. Below, the seeker misjudged the snitch again, but Cedric only called up encouragingly. "It's okay. Watch for its next turn." He turned and smiled at Jiang Wu. The sunlight made his gray eyes dance. Jiang Wu thought maybe this was what she liked. Whether she was buried in research in the greenhouses or spending slow afternoons like this with him, life felt simple and warm in a way she was starting to prefer. Author's note: I'm job hunting at the moment, so updates may be a bit less frequent or they may stay regular if I find the time. Chapter 136, Meteor Shower from the Astronomy Tower. After Quidditch practice, Cedric and Jiang Wu walked back toward the castle side by side. The setting sun lengthened their shadows, and the air smelled faintly of grass and evening. "Tired?" Jiang Wu asked, tilting her head to look at the damp skin at his temples. "A little," Cedric said, stretching his arms, his smile unusually bright in the sunset. "But it feels great. It's been a while since I've exercised like that. My joints feel looser. I just feel a bit sorry for that other seeker. I hope I didn't completely throw him off." "He was practically glowing when he looked at you," Jiang Wu laughed. "He's probably your new #1 fan." "Then I'll have to work hard to keep my image," Cedric replied teasingly. Then, as if remembering, he added, "Oh, there's a meteor shower tonight. Professor Sinistra mentioned it this morning. Ollie, she said it'll be a big one and the viewing conditions are good. Want to go up to the astronomy tower? It has the best view." A meteor shower. Jiang Wu felt a little stir of excitement. She had seen countless stars at Hogwarts, but never a meteor shower in particular. "Okay," she nodded. "Do I need to bring anything?" "Bring a thick robe, it gets windy at the top," Cedric said. "Leave the rest to me. I'll bring a few things." They agreed to meet that evening and parted ways in the entrance hall. Jiang Wu dropped her things in the Hufflepuff common room, put on an extra sweater, and wrapped herself in a soft, dark blue wool cloak. Around 11, the castle had quieted. She slipped out and found Cedric waiting by the fat lady's portrait hole. He'd changed into casual robes and was carrying a small basket. A smile lit his face when he saw her. Ready? They lowered their footsteps and climbed the spiral staircases. Moonlight spilled through narrow windows, patching the stone steps with cool silver. Whenever Filch passed on patrol, Cedric seemed to sense it beforehand, deftly pulling Jongwoo into shadows or down a side passage. She was impressed by how well he knew the castle. At last, they reached the top and pushed open the heavy wooden door. A cool night breeze rushed in, carrying the wide-open freedom of the hours after dark. The tower roof was empty. The sky above was a great velvet spread studded with diamonds. The stars were large and bright, almost within reach. The Black Lake and the Forbidden Forest lay bathed in hazy moonlight, quiet and mysterious. Wow, Jiang Wu breathed. The view here was far grander than anything she'd glimpsed from the greenhouses. Cedric found a sheltered corner, took a thick plaid blanket from the basket and spread it on the stone, and then, almost as if by magic, produced 2 thermoses and a paper bag. Sit, he said, gesturing to the blanket. Hot chocolate from the new tea shop in Hogsmeade, marshmallows and mint chips, and apple turnovers from the kitchens. Jiang Wu wrapped her cloak tighter and sat. When Cedric unscrewed a thermos, the sweet, rich smell of hot chocolate rose up, flecked with melted marshmallows and green mint chips. He handed her a bottle and opened the bag to reveal golden, crispy apple turnovers that steamed slightly in the cool air. Under the night sky, it was impossible to resist. They sat close, shoulders touching, sipping hot chocolate and nibbling turnovers as they waited. At first, only a few meteors crossed the sky, thin silver threads briefly stitching and then tearing through the deep blue. Look, Cedric whispered, pointing east. Then the meteors came faster, arcing white-hot across the heavens one after another, more numerous and brighter than before, like a silent, majestic fireworks display. Jiang Wu stared upward, forgetting the warm bottle in her hands. She had never seen so many meteors. They fell with eager, resolute beauty. So beautiful, she murmured. Very beautiful, Cedric said softly at her side. She turned to look at him and realized he was looking at her, not the sky. Starlight rimmed his face. His eyes were unusually bright and gentle, reflecting her own image. Heat rose to her cheeks, but the dark of night kept it from being obvious. Did you make a wish? Cedric asked with a smile, his voice low. Ah, too fast. I didn't have time, she admitted. She'd been too captivated by the display. That's okay, he said, taking a sip of his hot chocolate. They say wishes made during a meteor shower over Hogwarts are especially powerful. Next time, well, or every time after this, I can remind you. His words carried meaning that made her heart thump. Every time after this? A particularly bright meteor cut a long silver trail across the sky, briefly turning night to a small, glaring daylight. That one's huge, Cedric exclaimed. Quick, make a wish. Jiang Wu shut her eyes and clasped her hands. Wishes surged up, hoping the experiment would go well, hoping her friends would be safe and happy, hoping the people she cared for would always be there. When she opened her eyes, Cedric had opened his too. What did you wish for? She asked, curious. If I tell you, it won't come true, he said with a private, mysterious smile. But I hope one of them was about me. Her face flushed hotter. She lowered her gaze and took small sips of hot chocolate, the sweetness warming her all the way inside. The meteor shower gradually thinned. The bright flurries became intermittent. They stopped talking, content to sit side by side and share the last of the drink and pastry, watching the stars and listening to the night wind. Below the tower, the rest of Hogwarts slept. For a while, the two of them shared this quiet slice of sky and the simple, comforting closeness of the moment. Long after curfew, when the thermoses were empty and the meteors grew sparse, Cedric said softly, "We should probably head down." Reluctantly, Jiang Wu rose. Cedric folded the blanket and packed away the empty bottles with care. The basket was neatly full again. The descent felt shorter than the climb. At the Hufflepuff entrance, the fat lady's portrait dozed, letting out a soft snore. "Good night, Jiang," Cedric said gently at the doorway. "Tonight was wonderful." It was for me too." Jiang Wu nodded, still carrying the warmth of the hot chocolate and the glow of the meteors with her. "Thanks for the hot chocolate and the meteors." "We'll go again," Cedric promised, watching until she tapped the portrait hole. Inside the common room, the embers in the fire still glowed faintly. Jongwoo tiptoed back to the dormitory. Hannah and Susan were already asleep. She lay in bed but couldn't find sleep. When she closed her eyes, she still saw silver streaks across the sky and those gentle gray eyes watching her under the starlight. Tonight at Hogwarts, there had been meteors on the roof of the world, hot chocolate at the top of the tower, and something in her chest that felt full, almost overflowing. Chapter 137, Potions Class, Couple Partners. Perhaps it was from staying up late to watch the meteor shower last night, or maybe for other reasons, but Jongwoo felt a little off in potions the next morning. Professor Slughorn seemed unusually giddy. His round belly threatened to burst his fine velvet robe. "Students, quiet, quiet," he clapped, his voice booming. "Today we're learning a very practical and quite delicate potion, identification of amortentia and the preliminary preparation of its antidote." A ripple of curiosity and embarrassment ran through the classroom. Amortentia? That was a sensitive subject. "No need to be shy, no need to be shy," Slughorn chuckled. "Knowing how to recognize it and handle it, at least at a basic level, is compulsory for every competent witch or wizard. This isn't about romance, it's about safety. As usual, you'll work in pairs." His gaze swept the room and, very naturally, landed on Jongwoo and Cedric. Cedric Diggory was acting today as a distinguished senior teaching assistant, and Slughorn always found an excuse to have him around. "Ah, perfect, Mr. Diggory. Splendid that you're here. You and Miss Wu will be a group. Give us a fine demonstration of how to work together on such a delicate procedure." Every eye in the room turned toward them, some containing suppressed giggles and a few knowing oohs. Hannah and Susan exchanged a grin and mouthed, "Amortentia, ooh." Jongwoo's ears flushed red. Making an antidote for amortentia with Cedric? The arrangement felt deliberately pointed. Cedric, however, remained calm, a faint smile lifting one corner of his mouth as he inclined his head to the professor. "My pleasure, Professor." He sauntered to the empty seat beside Jongwoo and sat, whispering, "Looks like the professor's making things more interesting for us today?" Jongwoo lowered her head and pretended to study the textbook's description of amortentia's mother-of-pearl sheen, muttering, "He's doing it on purpose." The exercise began. Identifying amortentia demanded sharp observation and a very controlled sense of smell. Preparing its antidote was even more intricate, requiring seamless cooperation. "Moonstone powder, stir clockwise 3.5 turns, maintain an even speed," Cedric read aloud, guiding with a calm voice. His movements were precise. "Okay." Jongwoo steadied herself, measured the powder carefully, and stirred with concentration. Her training quickly masked her discomfort. "Now add 2 drops of mistletoe berry juice. Let it slide slowly down the side of the cauldron counterclockwise. Don't drop it straight into the center." "Understood." One recited the steps while the other performed the exacting actions. They passed tools and ingredients without hesitation. The potion in their cauldron took on a clear, iridescent pale gold, exactly the ideal state described in the book. Other groups were less fortunate. Some argued endlessly over stirring directions, others added the wrong ingredients and produced suspicious pink bubbles. Several pairs, after smelling their samples, blushed at the oddly specific scents amortentia conjured for each person: new dragonhide gloves, burnt cake, and the like. In contrast, Jongwoo and Cedric were efficient, calm, and professional. They tackled the task with the cool focus of solving a difficult problem rather than brewing a love potion. Only they felt the subtle currents under that calm. When Jongwoo needed to weigh an almost imperceptible amount of armadillo bile, Cedric pre-adjusted the balance. When he had to handle 2 similar dried herbs, she passed him the correct one without hesitation. Their fingers brushed now and then separated, each contact sending a quiet little shock through them. Once, as Jongwoo bent to retrieve pearl powder from beneath the table, her hair snagged on a button of Cedric's robe. "Don't move," he murmured, reaching over carefully to untangle it. His fingertips brushed the skin at the nape of her neck, warm, slightly calloused. Jongwoo shivered. "There." His voice was near, his breath against her earlobe. "Thank you," she replied, quieter than usual. Slughorn drifted over to inspect their work, smiling broadly. "Perfect. Impeccable. Look at the color. Look at the clarity. Miss Wu and Mr. Diggory. Such seamless cooperation. 20 points to Hufflepuff for exemplary teamwork. When the bell finally rang, a collective sigh of relief swept the room, especially from groups that had faltered. While they packed away, Cedric casually replaced their clean cauldron on the shelf and asked, "By the way, when the professor had us smell the samples earlier, what scent did you get?" Amortentia produces different scents for each person. Jiangwu hesitated. What had she smelled? The cool, green scent of rain on grass and earth, the dry warmth of sun-dried wood, a faint sweetness like honey cake fresh from an oven, and then, something reassuring and uniquely personal, a warm scent that belonged to someone she couldn't name. How could she say that aloud? Just a very ordinary scent, she hedged, stuffing her notebook into her bag. What about you? Cedric watched the flush rise in her cheeks and smiled, not pressing. I smelled a distinct oriental tea, like new tender leaves from the greenhouse, and the subtle ink scent of a book page. Very comforting. Jiangwu's heart skipped. What he described, everything he mentioned, seemed somehow tied to her. They left potions side by side, the air between them quietly altered, but not awkward. Sunlight poured through the corridor windows, casting their shadows close together on the floor. Perhaps Amortentia wasn't needed after all. What made the heart flutter wasn't a potion's illusion, but these ordinary moments, getting through messes together, sharing starlight, and working in perfect sync over a cauldron. The air in the greenhouse was always warm and humid, scented with soil and the pungent perfume of 100 magical plants. Jiangwu knelt at a workbench, carefully mixing fertilizer with a pinch of pyramid sand and pressing it into the soil around a sunfinch seedling. Its golden leaves shivered with a contented, lazy tremor, as if enjoying a private sunbath. Nearby, Cedric stood with a small brush, gently coaxing pests from the leaves of a few ill-tempered, biting cabbages, deftly avoiding their attempts to snap their mouths shut. His hands were steady and practiced. This was not his first time nursing cantankerous plants. Honestly, he said with a laugh as he worked, sometimes I think these cabbages require more patience than the curse traps in a pyramid. At least traps don't try to chew my fingers off. They don't give you dragon manure fertilizer either. Jiang replied without looking up, carefully measuring the fertilizer's dose. Cedric grinned. That's true, and they're kind of cute when they're not trying to attack. The greenhouse door opened. Professor Sprout bustled in, her patched hat thick with soil, her usual warm smile softened by an unusual spark of excitement. "Ah, Miss Jiang! Mr. Diggory! Perfect! You're both here!" she called, striding over with a small flower pot clutched beneath a heavy black cloth. They set aside their tools and greeted her. Professor Sprout placed the pot in the center of the bench, lowered her voice as if sharing a secret, and tapped the cloth. "I have a very, very special little thing here that needs reliable hands for a few days." She winked, then lifted a corner of the cloth. Instead of ordinary soil, the pot held deep blue gravel that shimmered faintly like starlight. Nestled in the middle lay an egg about the size of an ostrich's, perfectly white and round, silver spirals curling naturally across its shell. It gave off a clear, cool aura. "A mooncalf egg," Professor Sprout said, pride evident in her voice. "Extremely rare. An old friend entrusted it to me for incubation, but my greenhouse runs too warm, and these mischievous plants," she gestured at the surrounding foliage, "are far too noisy and distract it from soaking up the tranquil moonlight it needs." She looked at them expectantly. "Miss Jiang, you have that experimental area set up with Eastern methods, don't you? And Mr. Diggory, you've dealt with energy anomalies before. I thought perhaps the two of you could look after it until it hatches in Miss Jiang's quiet little haven." Mooncalves. Jiang had only ever read about these shy creatures in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, dancing under full moons, leaving patterns of silver flowers in their wake. Their eggs needed extreme quiet and a steady lunar influence to hatch properly. Cedric knelt and inspected the gravel in the egg closely. "This gravel is good eye," Professor Sprout approved. It's stardust sand collected from the high ledges of the astronomy tower, mixed with unicorn hair ash. It helps gather and purify the essence of moonlight. The pot must be placed somewhere that gets moonlight every night and kept absolutely dark and still by day, hence the cloth. It sounded delicate and important. "Of course," Jiang said at once. A chance to help hatch a mooncalf. She couldn't refuse. "Excellent. I knew I could count on you. Professor Sprout beamed and rattled off instructions. How to judge the egg's condition, the correct angle of moonlight, humidity levels, and other particulars. At last, she handed the pot to Jiang and patted Cedric's arm. Moving it at night will be your job, Mr. Diggory. It isn't heavy, but you must be steady. Don't worry, Professor, Cedric promised solemnly. When she left, they brought the pot to the quietest corner of Jiang's experimental area and reinforced the little barrier with wooden stakes carved with faded talismans. A mooncalf, Cedric murmured, watching the black-cloaked pot. I heard that wherever their hooves land, tiny silver flowers bloom. I hope we succeed, Jiang said. Excited and a little nervous, she felt the weight of the responsibility like a sweet secret pressing at her chest. Caring for the egg quickly became their shared task. At dusk, and again at dawn, Cedric could be seen carrying the pot, always draped in its black cloth, with the utmost gentleness between the greenhouse and the best moonlit spots in the castle, the high terrace, an empty classroom. He moved as if he were bearing the most precious treasure in the world. Jiang recorded the egg's condition and adjusted the microenvironment's magical balance, fine-tuning humidity and filtering stray energies so the egg could rest in complete tranquility. The routine was quiet and meticulous rather than tedious. Some nights they sat together beneath the moon, watching the egg and talking in low voices. Other times, Jiang logged notes while Cedric read aloud from his curse-breaking studies beside her. Occasionally, the silver spirals on the shell would glow faintly. They would huddle closer, breath held, convinced they were witnessing a sign that hatching was near. Their Hufflepuff friends noticed their new secretive activity and were curious. It must be some incredible experiment, Hannah declared. Something amazing, Senior said brought back, Susan added. But whenever pressed, Jiang and Cedric only shared a conspiratorial smile and remained tight-lipped. The mysterious egg brought a fresh, expectant color to their days. In the quiet of tending something fragile and waiting together, they found a little ordinary kind of magic, one that was itself a beginning. Chapter 139, Intelligence Exchange, at Madame Puddifoot's tea shop. Hogsmeade was always lively on weekends. After drinking butterbeer at the Three Broomsticks and restocking their experiment samples at Honeyduke's, Cedric Diggory and Jiang Wu ambled along the cobblestone streets. When they passed Madame Puddifoot's, Cedric stopped suddenly. The shop was all lace, ruffles, and saccharine charm, one of the favorite spots for Hogwarts couples. Want to go in and sit for a bit? He asked, a small smile tugging at his mouth. They say their cream Earl Grey and raspberry cupcakes are excellent, and he lowered his voice conspiratorially. This place is one of the best for hearing what people really think about new things. He winked at her, clearly referring to the Weasley twins' latest inventions. Jiang Wu eyed the pink displays and the sea of paired-off students. It did look very coupley. Still, Cedric was right. Madame Puddifoot's was a gossip hub. She was also curious how the public was reacting to Sunshine Serenade and the emotion-sensing hat. All right, she said. They pushed open the door and were hit by a wave of warmth and cloying floral perfume, powdered sugar, and the smell of black tea. Soft murmurs and shy laughter filled the room. Teacups chimed. Nearly every tiny round table was full, and pink paper confetti floated in the air. Madame Puddifoot herself, an over-decorated little whirlwind, greeted them and led them to a corner table curtained with lace. A ceramic cherub in a puffy skirt stood in the center, continuously scattering gold dust that settled mostly into the saucers. Jiang Wu tried to look like she was on a serious fact-finding mission rather than on a date. She ordered cream Earl Grey and a raspberry cake and tuned her ears to the surrounding conversation. It didn't take long to find useful tidbits. At a nearby table, two Ravenclaws were whispering excitedly. Have you tried the new toffee from the joke shop? The one that makes you sing with others when you eat it? I did. I ate it with my roommate. We hummed the Weird Sisters' new song together. It was so strange and lovely. My mood lifted so much. It's much better than that earlier one that made people go mad at random, though it's a bit pricey. They say it's because of a rare ingredient, something called coldwood. At another table, a Hufflepuff boy was complaining to his girlfriend. Don't get me started. My brother got a hat from Fred for his birthday. The moment he put it on, it turned a horrid yellow, and started dripping every time he got nervous. It soaked the essay he'd been working on, Merlin. Jiang Wu's face revealed nothing, but the conversation confirmed her fears. The emotion-sensing hat still had stability problems. Cedric caught it too and stifled a laugh, nudging her foot beneath the table with a told-you-so look. Then a conversation from a table a little farther back caught both their attention. A circle of older students was talking in low, serious tones. "Have you heard? The ministry has been quietly recruiting curse breakers. The pay's ridiculous, but the requirements are insane." "Of course I've heard. They want at least 5 outstanding NEWTs and practical experience. Who has that straight after graduation?" Apparently several ancient sites abroad have shown unstable magical activity. They need people fast. Someone like Cedric Diggory would be perfect, right? But I heard he already has a job. Yeah, everyone says he's been fantastic where he is. Departments are trying to poach him. The subject had drifted to Cedric, without the speakers realizing he was sitting close by. He looked a little embarrassed, stirring his tea and pretending not to listen. Listening to them, Jiang Wu felt a swell of pride and a small, vague tug of something else. His world was expanding, full of important missions and distant places, and Hogwarts suddenly felt smaller. Madame Puddifoot appeared then with a plate of heart-shaped cookies. "On the house, wishing you a sweet afternoon," she chirped. The cookies were pale pink with sweet dreams iced across them. Cedric picked one up and, almost by instinct, offered it to Jiang Wu, smiling. "Here, get some sugar and carry on with your intel gathering." Jiang Wu looked from the cookie to Cedric's smiling gray eyes. In the sugary haze and the soft whispers, the small ache she had felt earlier dissolved. She smiled and took a bite from the cookie he held. It was cloyingly sweet, yet not unpleasant. Surrounded by lace and glittering dust, eavesdropping on talk of him and the feedback on her own creations, sharing an absurdly sweet cookie. This muddled little mix of pride, vanity, and warmth was probably what being in love felt like. By then, the intelligence gathering had served its purpose. Cedric finished his tea and asked, "Had enough?" Jiang Wu nodded and ate the last of her raspberry cake. When they paid, Madame Puddifoot slipped a small packet of Lucky Peach Blossom tea into their bag with a wink. Outside, Hogsmeade's air was brisk and clean again. Both of them seemed to relax. "So Sunshine's Serenade is doing well," Cedric summed up. "But the emotion-sensing hat might need another round of tinkering." Jingwu agreed, then hesitated. "Earlier, about the ministry recruiting, they mentioned curse breakers. Would you consider it?" Cedric stopped and met her eyes. His expression grew serious. "That was just rumor. My current position is excellent. There's a lot to learn, and it's—" He let the sentence trail, then added softly, "It's fairly close to Hogwarts." Jiang Wu felt her pulse steady. He started walking again, his tone lightening. "Besides, if my next posting has interesting soil, I'll bring some back for you." The setting sun stretched their shadows long across the lane, their silhouettes weaving together. Hogsmeade's busy weekend was winding down, but their story felt like it had a very long road ahead. Chapter 140, The Night of the Moon, Beast's Hatchling. The days caring for the mooncalf egg were peaceful and full of quiet anticipation. The little flower pot in the corner of Jiang Wu's experimental plot had become a shared soft spot in both their hearts. Every dusk and dawn, Cedric dutifully carried it between the greenhouse and the moonlit terrace, his movements as gentle as a ritual. Jiang Wu recorded the changes in the silver patterns on the shell, feeling the life within grow purer and cooler with each passing night. Professor Sprout would sometimes stroll by, cast a satisfied glance from across the room, and offer an encouraging smile before leaving them to their vigil. At last, on a night when the moon hung especially bright and clear, the egg began to stir. Jiang Wu and Cedric were watching together in the greenhouse when the shell, which had been quietly drinking in the moonlight, trembled. They both held their breath and leaned closer. The shaking grew more pronounced. The silver spiral patterns along the surface began to glow softly and steadily, no longer just the occasional flicker. From inside came a faint tapping, as if something small were determinedly trying to get out. "It's going to hatch," Jiang Wu whispered, excitement leaking into her voice. Cedric rose immediately. "I'll fetch the black cloth. It may need to be shielded from light when it emerges." He remembered Professor Sprout's warning that newborn mooncalves were timid and could be startled by strong light. By the time Cedric returned with the cloth, a thin crack had appeared at the top of the shell. It widened quickly, accompanied by a crisp crunch. A fragment of shell lifted, and a tiny, wet, silver-furred nose pushed through, tipped with a small, shiny black nostril. The nose sniffed the air cautiously, then an even smaller head, covered in the same fine silver fur, followed. Two enormous, deep purple eyes opened half-lidded, as if still unaccustomed to the brightness. They seemed to hold the whole starry sky. Large, pointed ears drooped softly. The hatchling struggled, kicking. More shell splintered away. With a final effort, it freed itself and stood shakily amid the broken pieces. It was no larger than a palm, with a delicate, deer-like frame and limbs so slender they looked fragile, yet its tiny hooves already had a translucent, jade-like sheen. Wet fur clung to its body, making it look bedraggled but impossibly adorable. It gave a small sneeze. Jongwoo and Cedric both smoothed their breathing, afraid to disturb the fragile new life. Cedric unfolded the black cloth gently and held it so it softened the moonlight without plunging the creature into complete darkness. The mooncalf calmed slightly. It lowered its head and began to pick at the broken shell, nibbling slowly. The shells were rich in energy and crunched faintly under its tiny teeth. As it ate, the moonlight and night breeze dried its fur until it became fluffy and soft again, shimmering with a pale silver glow. The hatchling lifted its head and regarded the two taller figures with those starry purple eyes. It did not look frightened. Tilting its head, it let out a soft, whinnying sound, as if greeting them. Then, taking its first tentative steps into the world, its spindly legs trembled but held. Its tiny hooves touched the stardust-covered ground with barely a sound, leaving minute prints that glowed faintly like fragments of stars. Cedric breathed softly. Jongwoo's heart melted. She extended her index finger with extreme care. The mooncalf sniffed it, then nudged her gently with its cool, wet nose. A calm, pleasant warmth spread through her fingertip. "It likes you," Cedric said, a smile in his voice. A moonlight lotus in the corner of the greenhouse stirred and released a richer fragrance. The mooncalf's ears pricked up. Attracted by the scent, it forgot its new companions for a moment, wobbled to the flower pot, and began to nibble eagerly on the silver-white petals. "Its diet is quite broad," Cedric chuckled. They sat in silence, watching the newborn explore, sampling petals, batting at a glowing grain of stardust stirred by the breeze, and tentatively touching the small wooden stake with talismans that Jongwoo had set nearby. The whole scene was quiet and beautiful, full of the tenderness and small miracles of new life. After a while, the little one grew tired from playing and content from eating. It padded back to the broken shell, found the softest patch of stardust, curled up, buried its head in its fluffy silver fur, and soon settled into even, tiny breaths, fast asleep. The glowing hoofprints faded as if merging back into the moonlight. Cedric gently covered the hatchling with the black cloth to ensure a dark, peaceful sleep. They exchanged a look, each seeing the other's deep satisfaction and joy. "We succeeded," Jongwoo whispered. Cedric nodded, his gaze soft on the covered flower pot. "It's truly beautiful." That night, because a new life had arrived, everything felt different. The greenhouse at Hogwarts now held one more small secret to protect.